Let's talk macros. There's often conflicting and confusing information out there about macros. So in this episode, we distill things down in a simple and easy to understand way.
And of course, offer tips to make sure you're educated, empowered and confident to create a healthy, happy relationship with food.
Hi, I'm James Davis.
And I'm Claire Davis.
We're the Midlife Mentors, here to lift the lid on how to achieve health and happiness.
The balanced, no-nonsense way.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Midlife Mentors with me, James.
Episode.
I was waiting for that.
That joke's going to wear thin, isn't it? Hello, Claire here. Nice to... I was going to say see you, but we're not seeing you. Nice to have you here.
Although you can check us out on marvellous video on our YouTube channel, can't you?
Oh yes, you can. So how are you all? We feel like we haven't done one of these for absolutely yonks because we had James's amazing andropause workshop that went out. Podcast that went out last week, so we haven't actually recorded one for a couple of weeks now, so it feels like ages since we spoke to you. And we've been to Marbella.
Well, we've got loads to tell you. Before we get into that, let's just tell you today we're going to be talking about macros, because this is something that comes up so often with our clients, and it's a really useful kind of bit of information to know when you're looking to manage your body composition, whether that's to lose body fat, increase muscle, maintain where you're at. It's just the extra kind of icing on the cake that goes with calories in helping you hit your goals.
Yeah, I think people get quite confused about what macros even mean, how to get the best out of their macro split, what is a good macro split, what's a good combination, when you should eat them, yada, yada, yada. And we're going to kind of cover the top level. We could literally do in James does on our retreats. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But on our retreats, James does an entire hour and a half workshop, basically, on...
we go so in depth.
On Nutrition 101, on all the macros and all that sort of stuff. But we don't want you to snore off and get bored. So we're going to kind of whip through it as quickly as we can.
What are you saying about my presentation, my workshop, Claire?
Oh, it's amazing. It really is, so super educational. But at the same time... we want to try and keep it short and sweet. As geeky as we are, we will try and keep this short.
Yeah, we'll give you top level macro lowdown.
I love this. It's probably going to go on for ages though, I've said that. Yeah. But yes, we have been in good old Marbs, and I am now, drum roll please, a Spanish resident.
You are. So yeah, so exciting. We headed off to Marbs, which was...
I love we call it Marbs now.
Fantastic. It was great to be back there. Obviously, the weather was lovely. We caught up with some friends, had a great time. And now we're back isolated, aren't we?
And the anticlimax. Now we're back. We're actually, bless my parents. I'm so lucky to have a great relationship with my parents, and they're still around. But we're hanging out with them for our isolation periods. So, bit of a change when we got off the plane a few days ago to wet weather in the UK, but it's been quite nice the last couple of days.
It has. And so exciting news. I think I can think of two bits actually, Claire. The first one is Claire's been featured in Red magazine.
Oh yes, I was.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, 5 mistakes that midlife women make with regards to diet and exercise. So what I might do, I might add the little link to that on the show notes.
On Red Online. So, yeah,
Red
you
online.
can see that online. And the other thing is, we've sold out our country reset retreat. And the reason we're excited about that, it's our first retreat.
In about 18
for
months.
over a year, nearly a year and a half, for obvious reasons. We are so excited.
It went like hotcakes.
It did go like hotcakes.
We did a bit of promotion when we launched it. Well, no, we just actually told our fans that we'd launched it, and then didn't do anything with it because we were too busy doing all our Midlife Method program, our 8-week program, and all that kind of stuff, and bedding in some new technology in our app. And then literally went out with it last week, and all the rooms went. So
amazing, and we can't wait.
Oh my goodness, it's a month
Got to
away.
give a shout out to our partners on the retreat as well. Roller Granola, the amazing natural healthy granola,
Low sugar.
Essential Gains, providing our protein powder.
Yeah, the lovely Sam. So we so can't wait for that. We're going to be boring you silly with photos. If you're on any of our social media channels, I'm sure we'll be boring you. Just hold out for the weather. Come on, British weather. You've got this.
And then I was drop one teaser. We have got some guests coming up, haven't we?
Oh, some amazing guests on this
podcast.
podcast.
Stay tuned. If you are getting fed up of just Claire and I.
Oh
no, I know you're not. We're going to have some guests on very, very soon, and we're super excited for that.
Yeah, so excited. It's so hard not to say, but we won't. Okay, so let's get on.
Let's talk macros.
Let's get on with macros. So why, Mr. D, is this important that we talk about? We kind of said, but it's not just about... Here's the thing, we're not massively into our calorie counting. Of course, it's really, really important. Calories, at the end of the day, if you are consuming too many calories and you're in a calorie surplus, you will put on weight. If you are in a calorie deficit, you will begin to lose some of that body fat, body weight. But it's not just about being, checking in with your calories. We don't like people getting obsessed. But what we do like to do is educate people. And macros is a really important part and component of what we teach our clients. Yeah,
so I'd like to, if you can, listener, to visualise a pyramid. At the base of that pyramid are your calories. Because as Claire just said there, you can do all the stuff. At the top of the pyramid, by the way, we have like what we call supplements. So this is where people go wrong, right? They're all like, oh, I've got my skinny sprinkles. I've got my fat burner pills.
My skinny coffee.
Well, that's great. But here's the thing. Base of the pyramid, if you're getting your calorie intake wrong for your goals, you're going to fail. It's as simple as that. If you're consuming too regularly, you're going to put weight on. If you're consuming too few too regularly, you're going to
It's a truth bomb it's a truth bomb that a lot of people, all these influencers, and I'm sorry, but it's a lot of the fads try and get around this. There is no getting around that absolute scientific basic fact that James and I have just said.
No. So we've talked about those before, but a little higher up the pyramid, we have macros. And now some of you will be going, what is a macro? What is macro? Well, I'm sure you're all familiar with when we talk about micronutrients. So we think about, the vitamins, the minerals we get from our food. Our macronutrients are basically three broad ways of grouping our food. They can be grouped either as a carbohydrate, a protein, or a fat. And of course, some do straddle over others, but broadly, we'll each food we'll try and assign it as majorly carbohydrate, majorly protein, majorly fat. Now, why does that matter? Because there's a lot of research into the ratios of these macros that people eat, and it can have significant health benefits or negative consequences if we get the balance of the macros wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm going to say actually right now, should we just say what I think that for women, the split? Because a lot of people say, what's the right split?
Yeah, so again, before we go into this, bear in mind here, this is a highly individual thing. It'll depend on you, your metabolism, how your body reacts, and what your goals are. But we can give you broad guidelines.
Exactly.
Here.
That's why
broad windows.
That's why we always get a bit hesitant here, because then people take what we're saying completely for read. But when we're working with clients, we can at least have these conversations with them. But what we wouldn't want to do, so I'm going to give you some broad guidelines for women right now of your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. So what I wouldn't want any of the women that we work with doing is going any lower than about 35% of their daily intake of carbs. So basically 35% carbs, 35, I wouldn't want anyone going any lower or any higher than about 40% protein. I know it's an ideal situation not to go between any higher than 25% fat for women. So I'm just going to say those again. So I wouldn't want any women going any lower carb than 35% carb. I wouldn't want any women going any higher really than 35 to 40% protein. Protein, we're going to talk about why that's so important, but that's such an amazing split. If you can get 35 to 40% protein in your daily diet, that's amazing. And sticking between about 20% and 25% fat for women is also really, really ideal.
Exactly that. For men, I mean, they're not too dissimilar. We'd be looking at 45 to 50% of your daily intake would come from carbohydrates, 35 to 40% from protein, and somewhere in the region of 20 to 35% fat.
So they're not that different. But again, please don't get hung up on this. We work with people individually on this too. And it is a bit of a hit and miss, and don't get obsessed about this. This is one of the things I would say. When we work on MyFitnessPal, which you can link up to our app, our Midlife Mentors app, what we just say is just broadly get it right when you can, just with those in mind. This is not about being obsessive, it's about being aware.
Yeah, just to add there, of course, with the 3 macros, they do need to add up to 100% at the end. So, for example,
obviously
40, 30, 30. We're giving you windows there to operate within.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, on MyFitnessPal, that would do that for you. But yeah, it's always really quite sweet when we see clients send us their little macro split, or we see it inside their app, their macro split on MyFitnessPal, and it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful pie chart of the right macros in the right ratios. It's quite a lovely thing.
It is a lovely thing. Now, why are macros important? Well, there's a lot of research around this. So if you look at carbohydrates, it's worth saying as well, like we're talking about macros here and calories, but it's really important to think also not about necessarily the quantities and ratios of your food, but the quality of them.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you a clear example there. If you were to eat 100 grams of raw organic broccoli, that is 100 grams of pretty much pure carbohydrate. If you eat 100 grams of donuts, that is still 100 grams of pure carbohydrates. Obviously, there's going to be a massive calorie difference between them, but obviously the way those work once they're ingested into the body is going to be completely different. You're going to get so much more fiber from the broccoli, loads of micronutrients. The donuts are not really giving you anything apart from a huge sugar surge, sending your insulin racing up. So that's where we want to be mindful about, getting the calories right is the first part. Getting the macros broadly in the right place is the next part. But we want to always be mindful about the quality of what we're consuming.
Exactly, because it's about internal health and what it's doing to your organs as well. There was a TV programme quite a few years ago now that followed a guy that had the McDonald's diet. So basically he was in a calorie deficit. So he was on a calorie-controlled McDonald's diet, basically, and he actually lost weight because he wasn't in a calorie surplus. He lost weight, but the quality of that diet was appalling, and there were so many ill side effects from it because the quality of his food, or the macros, so to speak, was so poor.
Exactly that. If we look at these each in turn, so a lot of the time we think of things like, carbohydrates, they get a bad rap. I'm going to go zero in on fat as well, because a lot of people get freaked out and they're like, aim to be eating 20 to 35% of your calories from fat, and they get freaked out going, isn't fat really bad? Well, here's the thing, we're not talking here about lard, chopping a drop of lard onto your toast. We should be focusing on the healthy fats, our omega fats, the stuff we're getting from oily fish, stuff we're getting from nuts, stuff we're getting from avocados. We want to maximize healthy fats in our diet, the unsaturated fats, and minimize all those saturated and even worse, the man-made fats. In fact, we want to completely eliminate those from our diet. So getting those healthy fats, because fat actually help with our cell membrane fluidity, which means that our electrical impulses that work in our body, our nerves and stuff, can move much more freely around the body. They also help with the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, things like A, D, E, and K. So we absolutely need fat in our diet for our well-being. It's just got a really bad press.
Yeah, well, it was all low fat, wasn't it? And we're going to talk about this. Actually, we're not really going to talk about this because this is a whole nother thing on sugar. We did a whole podcast on sugar a little while ago. Yeah. We can get really into that. Obviously, when we talk about carbs, that's also talking slightly about sugars. But what I just want to say is, with the whole revolution of low fat, what they did is when you take fat out of anything, it loses its taste. So they just applied it with sugar instead. But it got such a bad rap. And as James said, fats are essential to our health and well-being. What I do want to say is,
do not fear the fat.
Don't fear the fat. What I do want to say though, again, with the boom of veganism. Everyone was eating a lot of avocados, loads and loads of avocados. And the problem with that is, obviously, they're very nutritionally dense.
Yes.
So when you're eating a lot of them, your fats can go high. They're good fats, but too much of a good thing is basically going to negate what you want to do. So we always say to clients, try not to have more than about, I would say, like 1.5 avocados per week. 2 avocados a week in your diet. If you're literally smashing that avocado on your toast every single day, it will start hindering your progress.
That's right. Certain foods, as Claire said, there are what we call nutritionally dense, meaning that they pack a big calorific punch for their size. You know, avocados, one of the chief culprits, along, of course, with nuts. You know, nuts are great to eat in small amounts. We don't want to be eating huge amounts because they are very calorific.
And also with eggs as well. So just making sure that you're balancing out with other sources of good, healthy fats, not just looking at eggs and avocados and things like that. So, yeah, just wanted to say that about the old avocados. I love them, but just be careful.
Yeah, it's something we'll watch out for in the food diaries, because you know they're green. They've got this perception of being super healthy.
They're green.
People are like, oh, I'm on my 10th avocado of the week, and we're like, yeah, you need to wind that back a bit. Let's talk about carbohydrates now. You know, so fat was kind of got the bad press, I guess, in the 80s and 90s, and then the carbs got it in the late 90s, 2000s. You know, no carbs before marbs, keto diets, Atkins diet, all that stuff. Listen, our bodies need carbohydrate energy to run. You know, our primary energy system is carbohydrate derived. We run off glucose and oxygen and glycogen, which is all coming from carbohydrates. Why they've got a bad rap is, in the Western world, we've just tended to eat way too many carbohydrates. So our Western diet's typically like, you know, up to 60 to 70% carbohydrates, and the wrong kind as well. So again, like we said with the fat, our carbohydrates, you know, 50% of your plate carbohydrates is not a bad thing if those carbohydrates are, you know, fresh vegetables, leafy greens, stuff like that. What we want to be minimizing are all the processed, what we call the beige carbs, the heavy carbs, things like rice, bread, cakes, baked goods, even potatoes. We don't want to have too many of those. So it's about making sure we're making the right choices with our carbs and getting the right ratio, but not fearing them. I remember talking about health benefits earlier on. The Lancet run a study looking at all various diet types. They were looking particularly at high carbohydrate because it was presenting such health issues in the Western world. And their hypothesis was they would find that there was a higher mortality risk with the high carbohydrate diet. And they classed that as anything, I think, above around 65%.
Yeah.
And indeed, they did find that, like, after about 65%, your mortality risk massively increased. Interestingly, though, what they weren't expecting to find, but did, was on the other end, a low carbohydrate diet also had an increased mortality risk. In fact, slightly higher than having a high carbohydrate diet. So we've got this U-shaped curve, and they found the optimum amount of carbohydrates in the diet was, I think, between 45 to 55%, round about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I said we wouldn't want women to go below about 35% carbs. If they're on kind of like a fat loss program, any lower than about 35% carbs, I honestly, we've both done so much research around this. We've actually been on low carb diets ourselves. James has actually done the keto diet. I haven't. But honestly, after you go that low on carbohydrates, you get all sorts of negative implications. You've got like brain fog. You get like what they call if you're going through keto, they actually call it a keto flu.
Yeah.
Your body starts to kick back if you're not having enough carbohydrates, and your brain function as well. You get brain fog. You can't concentrate.
Yeah. You have advocates for keto, but they don't truly do it if they're into sport and fitness as well, because they do what they call tactical or strategic keto, which means they eat carbohydrates around their training, so they've got the energy. Now listen, in the interest of honesty, I'm going to say here, the short term, if you follow keto, you can lose more weight more quickly than doing it calorie restricted. But the reason for that is you're not eating carbohydrates, so your body is not storing glycogen in the muscles for energy, which is why you feel weak. That's why you feel confused. So basically, you're losing glycogen, and glycogen also helps your body hold water. So this is the reason you can lose more weight, and I don't use the word fat here, I use weight, more quickly on keto. Actually, over the long term, over a year, they found no significant difference in fat loss between a normal calorie controlled approach or a low carb approach.
We do get slammed for it sometimes. I do get slammed sometimes if I've done a newsletter about keto or sugar or low carb and things like that. Because people say, "Oh, I got great results, Claire. I've got great results on keto. It works for some people." Listen, it does work for some people, but however, like James was saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is not something that you can sustain over the long term. It's just not.
No, I like beer and pizza too much.
Well, exactly. And here's the thing: life is about balance. It's about being enjoyed. You will not be able to socialise. You will not be able to socialise for the long term and have balance in your life if you're trying to stick to a restrictive keto diet. You can't.
Listen, we're all about balance. So it's like, eat sensibly, healthily, however you want to term it, about 80% of the time. But at the weekend, you want to have a pizza. People are like going, "Oh, I made a fantastic pizza out of powdered cauliflower base." And you're just like, jog on, mate.
I know. But even the cauliflower, there you are. You've got, to get into ketosis is really hard. And again, don't even get me started about keto drinks, keto shakes to get you into ketosis. It's difficult to get into ketosis and stay there. One thing I would say about carbs as well, though, what I would say is don't stack them too much in the evening. So we're always saying, there's a lot of research out there that says it doesn't matter when you eat your macros, it doesn't matter when you eat carbs. We really, really do believe that it does.
And there is also research that shows that it does. Exactly,
there's research that shows that it does. What we always say is front load your carbohydrates, your good carbohydrates, your oats, those low GI carbs that are going to sustain you over time, give you a slow release of energy, combined with a bit of protein. But in fact, we'll talk about protein in a minute. But just making sure that you front load them, because it is your body's primary source of energy. So you want to use it up. You don't want to stack up all those heavy carbs late in the evening, eating really late in the evening. They're just sitting there, not being used up. And when essentially carbohydrate is sugar. When sugar is not used, it gets stored as fat. So you're basically going to bed on a really heavy carb meal and lying there without it being used.
Now, before we get on to our favourite macro, Mr. Protein.
Mr. Protein.
Miss Protein. Mrs. Protein. Gender neutral protein.
Yes, gender neutral protein.
Last thing on combining fats and carbs. So this is where I love nutrition. It's so simple but so paradoxical, right? So I was an example of when you go away on holiday, when we're allowed to again, you've got the hotel buffet, but they've only got like really processed white bread, and people always think, right, if I don't have the butter on that, that's going to be better for me. But what happens is that really processed white bread is obviously high GI, meaning it's got high sugar content. It converts to energy very quickly.
I just got to say about bimbo bread.
If
anyone's been in Spain and they've seen bimbo bread, it is honestly, it's luminous. It's so horrible. White, it's luminous.
It lasts forever. Actually putting the butter on it, i.e. putting the fat on it, helps slow the release of the sugars. So this is an example where combining fat with a carbohydrate would be positive to you. But here's where it'd be negative, right? So on their own, fats don't trigger cravings and carbohydrates don't trigger cravings, apart from sugar does trigger cravings. But when you combine fat and carbs together, particularly high GI carbs, so fat and sugar together, and there's a fascinating rat experiment, it stimulates a reward center in the brain and actually triggers cravings, which is why we find things like ice cream, donuts so irresistible, and once we start, we can't stop.
Well, it doesn't appear in nature, so your brain it bypasses so many of our normal functions, and it's just like you gorge basically. Do you want to tell them about the rat?
Yeah, so the rat experiment was it's very horrible. They gave rats unlimited access to fat. They'll eat themselves till they're full and they'll stop. Give rats unlimited access to sugar. They'll eat till they're full and they stop. If you combine fat and sugar and give it to the rats, they'll eat themselves to death because it overrides the hormonal response to tell you to stop eating.
Exactly, because it's not naturally occurring. And your body's like, what's that doing? What's that doing? Right, okay, enough of the geeky stuff. Moving on to
protein.
Protein.
Now, protein is awesome.
It really, really is. So firstly, I'm just going to let you know that this is a total game changer. It was a total game changer for me. I always say this. but it is a total game changer for our clients when they start looking at their protein macro, their protein intake, and upping a little bit, because it is quite hard for a lot of people to necessarily get, especially vegan, vegetarian. It's quite hard to get your protein intake up. Once you're aware of what it should be and what holds a lot of protein, it's a game changer for our clients because it triggers the hormone called leptin, and leptin is the hormone that says I am full. So what a lot of our clients say is, oh my goodness, I've upped my protein and I am actually feeling fuller for longer.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, protein. It obviously massively helps with muscle repair and recovery, but it's actually digested slightly lower down in the gut. So here's the interesting thing. About 70% of the calories from protein are available to us. So if you ate 100 grams of protein, about 70 grams of that you'd actually have available to you. The rest would be passed out. Compare that with fat. It's about 98%. Pass out. 98% available to you, and carbohydrates 90 to 95% available to you. So you can see, if you're eating protein, already you're ingesting less of it. It also has a thermic effect, meaning it actually uses more calories to digest than fats and carbohydrates do as well. So there's two great things about it, and like Claire said, it triggers leptin, which gives you this I'm full feeling much, much earlier on.
And I would say, people say, if I don't eat meat or fish, so obviously your best protein sources are lean meat, fish, but if you're obviously vegetarian, you can go for your eggs and your pulses and your beans. Vegan's a little bit harder, I'm not going to lie. That's when we do say, we always talk about having protein shakes as well, but that's an add-on. It's not to take away from natural sources of protein. What we don't always want people to do is have a protein shake as a meal replacement. It's a meal supplement.
Exactly.
So what we do say to some clients, if they're vegan, is to get a really good quality protein powder, but do try as much as you can to get it from natural food sources.
Yeah, and also don't be hoodwinked by all this labelling now of high protein foods, high protein Mars bars, high protein marathon bars. Listen, there's a big difference between a actual, I'd say, sports brand protein bar, which is aimed at just getting the protein into you, as opposed to some numpty that's just decided to make a high protein pizza or a high protein chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Just don't go for that.
It's another fad, and also I would say when you look at the back of, I think it is a Mars bar, protein Mars bar, the sugar content of the protein one is insane. It's higher than the original. So again, they're just mixing around with fads, trying to drag you in, thinking, I'm having lots of protein because I've heard protein's really good. Unfortunately, the sugar content is skyrocketed.
Now, one way you can make macros really easy for yourself is, we always say, just prioritise protein over everything else. So every meal, aim to go for the protein items and eat them first, because particularly if weight loss is your goal, fat loss is your goal, you probably find that you will then naturally will eat less carbohydrates and less fat. So that's a really simple way, without getting into calculations, just eat more protein and eat it first.
It's so true. If you've got a plate and you've got a lovely bit of fish on there, if you're out for dinner, try to avoid chomping down on the bread roll that looks really delicious next to you, because actually that is not going to fill you up. It's not going to trigger that leptin in the same way as the protein will. So do try and hold off, because actually that carbohydrate, that lovely loaf of bread that's sitting next to you is going to become less appealing as you fill up on your protein.
Exactly. So that is macros, but I just want to circle back around to what we said at the start. It's about food quality. So there's a few studies now that have shown if you take groups of people and you feed them equal calorie diets with equal macro splits, but one eats whole foods and the other eats what we call ultra processed foods. These are foods that have gone through a lot of manufacturing processes, have a lot of chemicals and additives. Despite the fact, the basic science, this is again why I love nutrition, the basic science would say, if you've got two identical people and they're eating identical calories and identical macro range, then they should get the same results. People who eat ultra processed food put on more fat than people who eat a whole food diet. And my leaving thought on that is, ultra processed foods rightly get a bad name. Things like your chicken nuggets, your crisps that aren't really crisps, all that kind of stuff. But now we're seeing, a lot of milk substitutes and meat substitutes would also fit in this category. So we think we're eating something healthy, maybe. And listen, I'm not knocking veganism here. If you're doing it for the ethical reasons, that's cool. But if you're doing it purely for health reasons and you're buying these meat substitutes, really do your homework on what's in them, because a lot of them would classify as an ultra-processed food as well.
Be really, really careful with that. We've always been a bit cynical about what's in those, having looked at the back of packets and things, but there is more and more research now that's coming out saying that they are ultra-processed and as bad as, the ultra-processed food that we're eating that aren't vegan. We always try and say fulfilled or see to your table in as few steps as possible. If you remember that, you can't go very, very wrong, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, just make sure that you aren't obsessing about it, that that your calories are in the right range. Again, if you eat a little bit too much one day, just pull it back the next day. It's about giving you confidence. This is what we always want to do with our clients. It's about helping educate you, helping you understand why your body's responding in certain ways, because then you're more bought into the entire process. You feel more confident, you feel more empowered in the process, and then you can make adjustments. And as you make those adjustments over time, you become more and more confident and trust yourself to go a bit off piece sometimes and go, oh, hang on a minute, tomorrow I need to probably a few less carbs and a bit more protein, blah, 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 blah. But it's about just having a healthy relationship with food at the end of the day.
Exactly that. Well, we hope you enjoyed that. You probably will have questions after that. We're always here for you. So team@themidlifementors.com.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
join our fabulous free Facebook community, the Midlife Mentors community, where we giving away information like this all the time and answering people's questions. But we'd love you in there.
Absolutely, and don't forget our YouTube channel. But all the links are always in the show notes, so just reach out to us. If you've got any ideas for topics, then let us know, and please do share the life out of this podcast. It's our passion and our purpose to help as many midlifers experience health and happiness during midlife. So do share it and review it kindly. And we're sending you so much love. You take care.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Midlife Mentors with Claire and James Davis.
We'd love to hear from you, so drop us a line at info@themidlifementors.com with any questions or topic suggestions.
And make sure you join us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find us under the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah.